How many of you have tough families that you have to live with? Almost all of us. Someone in the family. I know, usually the old man, I know. But, family wounds are slow to heal, aren't they? They're just slow to heal. I hope that your childhood was a happy time when your parents kept everyone fed and safe and chuckling. I think the chuckling part's a pretty important part of family life. And I hope your dad was one of those that came home every day, and that your mom tucked you in every night, and your siblings were your best friends. Yet I know that that's not always the case. The most famous family tree in the Bible suffered from a serious case of blight. Adam accused Eve. Cain killed his younger brother. Abraham lied to Sarah. Rebekah favored Jacob. Jacob cheated Esau and then raised a gang of hoodlums. Hoodlums! The book of Genesis is a relative disaster if you really want to look at it close. And what a way to start the Holy Bible. And so if you ever think your family's in bad shape, just go back to Genesis and read it. It's been there forever for all of us to see. Joseph didn't deserve to be abandoned by his brothers. He didn't. True, he wasn't the easiest guy in the world to live with, I'm sure. He boasted of his dreams, and then he tattled on his siblings. I think any little sister does that. He deserves some of the blame for the family friction. But he certainly didn't deserve to be dumped into a pit and sold to a merchant for pocket change. The perpetrators in that case were his 10 brothers. 11 sons shared the same dad, shared the same dinner table, and the same playground. 11, they were supposed to look after him. They were supposed to look after him. He was the youngest of all. And Joseph's kin, well, they were out of line. And his father, Jacob, was out of touch. Now I know that Benjamin was the 12th son. Don't get me wrong, I may have misspoke a little bit there. With all due respect, though, you know what the patriarchs are, who they are? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. The 4 of them in Genesis. The patriarchs could have used a basic course in marriage and family life. They could have. Mistake number 1. Yeah. Jacob married a woman that he didn't love. But he married her in order that he could marry the one he did love. Mistake number 2. They were sisters. That's like lighting a match and throwing it into a firecracker stand just to see what happened. I used to sell fireworks. You don't know. Some people kind of get tipsy during the day and they drive by your stand and start shooting Roman candles at your open doors and open windows. Man, you don't know what would happen until one of those suckers pops in there and you're scrambling out the doors. But man, the first sister bore him sons. The second sister, not so much. So to expand his family, he slept with an assortment of handmaidens and concubines and had a covey of kids. Rachel, his favorite wife, that's number 2, finally gave birth to Joseph, who became the favorite. And she later had a second son, Benjamin, leaving Jacob. Let me tell you, she died giving birth to Benjamin. Okay? Leaving Jacob with I'd say unruly household and a broken heart. You know? Joseph coped by this. He checked out. I mean, he started letting the sons take over the business. He forgot all about the discipline stage of raising kids. When Joseph went bragging about his dreams and about his brothers bowing to him, did you see Jacob jump in there and say, "Hey, boy, we don't talk about stuff like that," or, "Hey, you have to have respect for your brothers"? No, we didn't see him do that. And when Jacob got wind of his sons had taken the flocks over to Shechem, this was a spot that they'd had a lot of prior conflict. And instead of him going there and kind of telling the boys to come on back, what he did is he sent Joseph, the youngest, to check on him. That didn't turn out too well, did it? No. He sent his son to do a father's job. Obstinate sons. I've been called the ornery son a few times. I don't know about obstinate, but an oblivious dad. I mean, the brothers needed a father, and the father needed a wake-up call. That's what was happening here. And Joseph needed a protector. But he wasn't protected, was he? He was neglected. And he landed in a distant land, in a dungeon. Initially Joseph chose not to face his past. I mean, I think he just tried to put it behind him. I imagine those first 2 years in prison, it was tough. And he had to harden up. And one way to harden up is what? To kind of forget everybody behind. Because it gets pretty sad when they don't write you, doesn't it, guys? It gets pretty sad when you feel that you've just been forgotten. And the key's tossed away. And who cares if you ever come out? And that's the way some of you felt. I don't ever remember getting many letters. And I was just at scout camp. What can I say? But Joseph had been prime minister for almost a decade before he saw his brothers again. And I can almost see what was happening. He's sitting there, and he's all decked out with his necklaces with gold eagles and everything, and he's got the old black wig that looked like a helmet back in those days because he didn't have any hair, and he's shaven, and I mean he's had the Egyptian look down pat, and that coat that probably had some blood spattering on it was no more, and it's replaced by a royal robe. And the kid from Canaan had come a long ways. And Joseph could travel to any land he wanted to. I mean, he had the power to do it. He could have returned to Canaan, but did he? Not even a thought. Not a thought. He could assemble an army, and he could have gone down there and say, "Hey, bro, remember me? Guess who I got with me? See these boys behind me?" But he didn't do that. He had the resources, but he didn't do it. Didn't use them. He could have sent his first father, or he could have sent his father a message. "Hey, Dad, do you know I'm still alive? I never have heard from you. Did you ever come looking for me?" No, I guess not. He'd had perhaps about 8 years of being the top dog there. And he kept his family secrets secret. Untouched, untreated, Joseph was content to leave his past in the past. Yeah. Isn't that the way we kind of handle our past sometimes? But God wasn't happy with that. He wanted a little more out of Joseph. I mean, restoration matters to God. Do you understand? Restoration matters to God. And the healing of the heart involves more than the healing of the past. So God shook things up. In Genesis chapter 41 it says, "All countries came to Joseph in Egypt to buy grain, because the famine was severe through all the lands." And there's a long line of folks coming to Egypt because they heard they had what? They had grain, something they didn't have. And then all of a sudden, look at what the cats drug up. Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. Chapter 42, verse 3. Joseph heard them before he saw them. Have you ever been somewhere and you're talking to somebody? And I imagine Joseph was talking to a servant over here, maybe giving instructions, maybe listening to him, and all of a sudden he heard the sounds of his past. They even have the regional dialect that he came from. And he, shh, be quiet. He had to listen. And then he turned and he looked. And there they were. There they were. In his palace, in his house, on his terms. And yeah, they were a little balder, a little grayer. I get that way about every other year. Nowadays it's coming about every other month. But they were pale and gaunt from hunger. And their sweaty rose probably stuck to their skins, and the road chalk was on their cheeks, and these Hebrews stuck out in Egypt like hillbillies in Times Square. I was thinking of Coogan's Bluff, the movie, Clint Eastwood, cowboy going to New York City, didn't quite fit in. I tell you. But it wasn't just the language of his harp and Joseph just knew what they were there for. I don't know if I don't think they were there so much for a handout, because the book says, hey, that the brother says, we've come. I mean, I can almost imagine they're speaking in front of the Prince of Egypt, and they're down below him, and they're trying to make words out of it and say what's going on in the world, and they spoke to him in gestures, I imagine, because they didn't know that he knew Hebrew. You see, they thought he was just an Egyptian. And he's probably doing sign language. They saw the stalks of grain, maybe on a picture or something there, and they point there. Please. Everybody knows, please. And they motioned for one of the brothers that had the money to carry it over, and told him to spill it out on the table, and he did, to show them they had money to pay for what they were after. And when Joseph saw the silver, I'm wondering if he just didn't erupt. His lips curled, his stomach turned. He had named his son, God Made Me Forget. But when they threw that silver down, it turned his mind back to when he last saw his brothers and the type of silver they'd had in their hands, and it was from the merchants that bought him after being in the pit, and him crying out and them not listening, and then to see them make the exchange for money and tie him up and give him and he went away whimpering, and his brothers were laughing. And I imagine the rage came all over him. Just all over him. And he called in a Hebrew translator. And Joseph scowled at his brothers. And he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. I think roughly was probably a nice word, you know. I'm imagining the tone of maybe a watchman. Who are you? What brought you out here? And the brothers fell face first on the dirt, and reminded Joseph of what? One of his dreams, where his brothers fell down and bowed before him. Well, we came from Canaan. You know, maybe you've heard of it up north a little bit. And Joseph glared at him. Nah, I don't believe you. Guards, they're spies. Arrest them. They've infiltrated. They're enemies. And the brothers started speaking all at once. Oh, you've got it wrong. No, your holiness, your esteemed honor. We're salt of the earth. We belong to the same family. This is Simon over there, and that's Judah. And well, we're there. There were 12 of us at one time, and the youngest is now with their father, and the other one he's died. Don't you know that Joseph took all that in and gulped? His father was alive. Benjamin was alive. And he hadn't seen him in 20 years. And they thought that he was dead. Tell you what, he snapped. I'll let one of you go back and get the youngest and bring him to me. The rest of you I'm going to throw into jail. And with that, their hands were tied behind their backs, and they were led off to jail. And don't you imagine it was probably the same jail that Joseph first came into and spent those first 2 years in? Woo, man. Isn't it curious how the events turn? I mean, the gruff forces, the harsh treatment, the jail sentence, the abrupt dismissal. We've seen this sequence before, haven't we? But it was from the brothers. And now it's Joseph's turn. My. They threw him in a hole and didn't listen to his cries. My. How the worms turned. You know what was going on? I think it was Joseph trying to get his bearings. I think this was a total surprise to him. He hadn't thought of them in years, and he had no intention of thinking of them. And all of a sudden now he came face to face with them, and he didn't know exactly how to handle this. Yeah. He could take things like the famine. He planned for that. And Potiphar's wife, he could resist her. He could resist her. Pharaoh's assignment, he could manage that. He took it and he ran with it. He just ran with it. But when he had a mixture of hurt and hate that surged through his body, Joseph didn't know what to do. Literally did not know what to do. And maybe you didn't either. Maybe you didn't either. Your family may have failed you. Your early years were hard ones. The people who cared for you didn't. But like Joseph, you made the best of it. And sometimes that wasn't a pretty thing at all either. You made a life for yourself, even started your own family perhaps. You were happy to leave Canaan in the rearview mirror, but you know what? God wasn't. This was not his plan for Joseph. He gives us more than we request by demanding that he go deeper into us. He wants not only your whole heart, but he wants your heart to be whole. Why? It's because hurt people usually hurt people. And that's not your nature anymore. That is not to be your nature anymore. Think about it. Why do you fly off the handle ever so often? Condi wonders that about every other night. Why do you avoid conflict? Why do you seek to please everybody? Might your tendencies have something to do with the unhealed hurt within your heart? God wants to help you for your sake. Suppose Joseph had refused his brothers, summarily dismissed them. Washed his hands of the whole mess. And God's plan for the nation of Israel depended upon the compassion of Joseph at this time. A lot was at stake here. And that's why God was starting to intervene here. Some years ago, I had a Stepping Stone Ministry resident told me that he had been called to a funeral home to identify the body of his father, who had been shot in the middle of the night by his ex-wife. And the shotgun blast was just one in a long line of angry outbursts between the two of them. He remembers standing near the body and resolving, it stops with me. This whole cycle is going to stop with me. And I think we got to make the same resolve when we see a pattern within our life that is tearing us down and hindering us from moving forward with God. Yes, your family history may have had some sad chapters, But your history doesn't have to be your future. This generational garbage that we carry around with us has to stop here and now. You don't have to give your kids what your ancestors gave to you. First, you don't have to yell at them at the drop of a pen and then dismiss them saying, I give up on you. And second, for sure, when the physical starts, it doesn't have to happen. It doesn't have to happen. Sometimes we just got to sit down and talk to God about the scandals and the scoundrels in our lives. Invite Him to relive their betrayal with you. Bring out in the open to God what's happened to you. And that's what was happening to Joseph here. He kind of restaged the hurt for a reason. You see, revealing often leads to healing. That's why sometimes we need to find something that we can really go to. And if you can't find somebody in person, go to the Lord above. You know? And I don't mean just sit there and pray, Lord, help me to forgive my father. Unearth the details, man. God, Daddy never wanted to be part of my life. He never came to one of my birthday parties, and I hated him for it. Or every day I came home from school and Mama was drunk on the couch, and I had to make dinner, and I had to take care of my brother, and I had to do my homework by myself. It's not right, God. Just lay it out before Him. Lay it out to Him. Tell Him what your hurts are. It's difficult, sure. But let God do His work. Do you hear me? Let God do His work within you. The process may take a long time. In fact, it may take a lifetime. But family pain is the deepest pain because it was inflicted usually at an early age or as a young person. It involves the people that should have been trustworthy. Maybe you were too young to interpret the mistreatment you received. You didn't know how to defend yourself. Besides, your perpetrators of your pain were large. Your dad, your mom, your uncle, your big brother, they towered over you, usually in size and often in rank. And many times they judged you falsely. And you believed them. I mean, that's what the devil does. He tells us what? The lies? He tells us lies. All this time you've been acting on faulty info. You're stupid, you're slow, you're dumb like your dad, you're fat like your mother. And decades later, these voices keep coming back to you and haunting and echoing in your subconscious. But they don't have to. They don't have to. Let God transform them into a new person by changing the way you think. The way you think. Where do I find that? The Bible. God's Word. Try it. You'll be amazed. Let Him replace childish thinking with mature truth. Go to 1 Corinthians 13. I tell you what, you're not who they say you are. You are a child of God, first and foremost. His creation, destined for heaven. You are part of a family. Let him set you on the path to reconciliation, though. And that's what Joseph did. The process was to be long and difficult. And it occupied 4 chapters of the Bible. 4 chapters. You know what can happen in 4 chapters in the Bible? Decades. Centuries. But he let this be Joseph's 4 chapters. But you know, I only took 1 step to start the process going. You see, after 3 days, Joseph released the brothers from prison. And he told them, go on home. In fact, he probably used the tough guy said, all right, you just giddy up and get out of here. But I want you to come back with that brother of yours, because I'm going to keep one of the brothers here. But you better bring back that other brother so I can talk to him and at least save his butt. Did I say that? But save his tail. But man. So going back to Kansas or Colorado or wherever you came from, oh yeah, that Canaan place. Going back. But make sure you come back. And they agreed. They went right in front of Joseph. You know what they started doing? They started rehashing why they thought they were getting all this stuff piled upon them. And then they said to one another, we are truly guilty concerning our brother, for we saw the anguish on his soul, and then he pleaded with us, and we would not hear, and therefore this distress has come upon us. Guess what? They were talking to each other in Hebrew, and they didn't understand that Joseph knew what was going on. When he heard the news, Joseph turned away so he couldn't see, his eyes filled with tears. He didn't speak for a few moments. At least a lump in his throat turned into sobs of becoming a tough guy. He stepped in the shadows and he wept. And the Bible says he did this 7 times again. He didn't cry when he was promoted by Potiphar or crowned by Pharaoh, but he blubbered like a baby when he learned that his brothers hadn't forgotten him after all. And when he sent them back to Canaan, he loaded their saddlebags with grain. A moment of grace. A moment of grace. And with that small act, healing started. And if God healed that family, who's to say that he won't heal yours?